So shortly after Dollar Tree became $1.25 Tree, I noticed that they started popping up with a lot of crafting materials. I've seen these kits around, but I've always ignored them because if I go to Dollar Tree for crafting materials, it's going to be just to buy the yarn. But I saw this and I was curious about it. I was out and about and I didn't have any of my crafting supplies, so I decided it'd be cheaper to just grab a kit, which that already comes with all of the materials, including a hook, than to buy a whole new set of hooks and to buy yarn and scissors. I did end up buying a new pair of scissors, but this was something that I needed at home. First was this crochet hook, then this very flimsy needle. Now, I'm not one to diss plastic crafting materials. You have what you have on a budget, but this one, it was very hard to use, and I definitely didn't have to ram scissors into the hole just to be able to make room for the very thin yarn. It came with a light pink yarn, a slightly darker pink yarn, and a black yarn. Note, this is exactly what was given to me in the kit. I didn't use this color. I did use these two, however. It came with some googly eyes that I really genuinely don't know how they expected me to attach. And it came with some written instructions. Also, a bag of stuffing that I already used some of. Now again, this is something that you could find at Dollar Tree, so I wasn't really expecting anything high-end. However, what I wasn't expecting was an entirely AI-generated pattern. I honestly should have been tipped off just by looking at these. These are not real crochet stitches. Nothing is attached coherently. The embroidery on the face is bad, and the eyes are just not what we are given in the crochet kit. But being optimistic, I saw this dinosaur here. It looked more like an actual crochet pattern, and it had the eyes that are provided in the kit. I noticed here that it was just basically the fundamentals for crochet. I've been crocheting for many years, so whenever I see that in a pattern, I usually skip past it. Had I read it, I probably would realize that this isn't really a crochet pattern generated by a person. I recognize that this kit has an English translation and a French translation. On the instruction sheets, it's written in English and in French. So it didn't really tip me off that something could have been wrong, because it could have just been a poorly written translation of an actual good French pattern. Again, at this point, it's just me being clueless because I completely ignored the signs. These pictures are of chains, and here we're talking about rows, but this is a pattern that's clearly worked in the round. Here we have sewing panels, and those are double crochets, not single crochets, which is what's used here. So this is all just tipping me, this would have tipped me off that this was an AI generated pattern. But again, when I crochet using patterns, I typically don't look at the pictures. I don't read the fundamentals, because this is something that I don't really need in order to make the pattern. I can just jump into it. Now, for those who know how to read crochet patterns, I'm just going to read this really quick so you can see if I'm off in thinking that this is AI. You will sew 6 crochet loops for the first row and 8 crochet loops for the second row. Automatically, we know that this is not beginner friendly, because sewing 6 crochet loops, or I would say doing 6 single crochets, wouldn't be into the first row, it'd be into the first round. And in order to get to 6 to 8, you'd have to do 2 increases. So a beginner would not know how to do this. This says nothing about increasing. It says nothing about rounds. So automatically this is off, but I continued. Just using my knowledge, just knowing about standard increases. 10 crochet loops for the third row to fourth row, 12 crochet loops for the 5RD row to the 6th row, 14 crochet loops to the 7RD row to the 8th row. So automatically I'm just noticing, there's poor grammar, the numbers are all wrong, the spacing's wrong, sometimes they use periods, sometimes they use commas. It's just not something that could be written by a person, and this is not a translation error. I got to about row 10 when I realized that something was completely wrong. In this pattern, I can see that there's a tail, so I thought, okay, maybe the tail turns into the body, and then there's a little bit of a decrease, which then goes into the head. So I was like, okay, well, let me set my crochet hook down and read it a little bit. So I see this. 16 crochet loops for the 9RD row to the 10th row. 14 crochet loops to the 11RD row to the 13th row. So now I'm seeing that there's supposed to be a decrease. So that's 2 decreases in one row. So it just keeps decreasing. It keeps decreasing and it keeps decreasing. So for anybody who knows what that means it gets to this cone shape, and then we're going to decrease so that there'd be an inverted cone shape. That body would not create this shape. It would not create this round bean shape with this little tail. It would just create an oval cone shape. And I've seen my fair share of AI generated crochet patterns on the internet. They usually do start out pretty normal, but then they just turn into utter nonsense that absolutely would not create the pattern that they show you. They usually take either a completely AI generated picture of something that they think looks nice, or they steal pictures from actual artists and then give patterns that just don't make what you wanted to make. I didn't break the bank with this. I know what I was going to get. I got a plastic crochet hook, a plastic knitting needle, some of the cheapest yarn that just frayed very, very easily. I knew I wasn't going to get a lot out of this. It was $1.25. However, it was a little frustrating knowing that me, as an experienced crocheter, couldn't even fix any of the mistakes that are in here because there's just so much. I could probably freehand that. That wouldn't have been an issue. The issue is that I'm thinking about all of the new crocheters who walk into a Dollar Tree. Maybe they don't have a lot of money. Maybe they're just begging their parents to learn the craft. Maybe it's somebody who just wants to see if they even enjoy the craft. And I know from personal experience that learning from patterns without tutorials is an absolute nightmare. But it's doable. It's doable when you're given actually cohesive instructions written by a person, written by someone who dedicates their time to writing down the pattern for something that they created. This is not this. This is what I ended up making with the yarn that was in the kit. I don't want beginner crocheters or crocheters on a budget to get frustrated with this kind of stuff. I'm still going to go to Dollar Tree for yarn because it's cheap and it's accessible and they have many options. It's great for people who need a bunch of cheap crochet hooks. I've seen that they have sets of these exact crochet hooks, but with many, many different sizes. They also have knitting needles, they have scissors, they have so many things there that anybody on a budget or any new beginning crafter can use. Don't get discouraged, always look for cheap alternatives, but please do not get these kits. Unless you know how to freehand something and make the best out of the situation, this isn't going to be your friend.